Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israeli forces kill Al Jazeera correspondent Anas Al Sharif and 4 colleagues in a targeted strike on their media tent near Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. Israel claims Al Sharif was a Hamas cell leader, while rights groups say he was targeted for his frontline reporting. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani has condemned Israel for the deliberate targeting and killing of Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza. The UN has also slammed Israel's actions, warning that such killings violate international law and press freedom. Israel has now stepped up its military operations in Gaza after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered to take full control of Gaza City to defeat Hamas and free hostages, while the UN Security Council hears fresh calls for a ceasefire and more aid to the Palestinian enclave. EU foreign ministers will hold an emergency meeting today with Ukrainian counterpart Andriy Sybiga to address fears that the upcoming Trump-Putin summit in Alaska could force Kyiv into territorial concessions. European leaders, including France, Germany, Britain, and EU chief Ursula von der Leyen, are to attend this meeting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that making concessions to Russian President Vladimir Putin would not end the war. His remarks come ahead of President Trump and President Putin's expected talks on upcoming Friday. Norway's $1.7 trillion sovereign wealth fund has divested from 11 Israeli companies over alleged human rights violations in the occupied West Bank, according to a statement released on today. The fund, managed by Norges Bank Investment Management, said the firms were involved in settlement construction contrary to international law. Israeli authorities said that the Western Wall in Jerusalem has been vandalized with graffiti condemning the war in Gaza, marking a rare political deface of the holy site, according to local media reports. The incident sparked widespread condemnation amid escalating criticism of Israel's military expansion in Gaza. The Nigerian military killed over 100 members of a criminal gang known as bandits in a joint air and ground raid on Sunday in Makari Forest, Zamfara State, according to a conflict monitoring report. The operation marks one of the deadliest clashes in northwest Nigeria's ongoing fight against armed groups. Al Jazeera says its journalist Anas Al Sharif, killed in an Israeli airstrike on August 10th, left a final message to be posted if he died. In the note shared on social media, the 28-year-old vowed he had never hesitated to convey the truth, hoping that God would witness those who remained silent. Al Sharif died along with 4 Al Jazeera colleagues, an assistant and freelance reporter Muhammad Al-Khaldi, when a tent near Gaza City's Shifa hospital was hit. Medics say 2 other people also died. Just minutes before his death, Al Sharif posted that Gaza City was under intense bombardment, warning that if this madness does not stop, nothing will remain but rubble. Israel's military claims Al Sharif led a Hamas cell involved in rocket attacks. Al Jazeera, funded by Qatar, strongly rejects that, calling him one of Gaza's bravest journalists, and the attack this desperate attempt to silence voices. Al Sharif was previously part of a Reuters team that won the 2024 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photograph. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Gilad Hirschberger. He's a political psychologist at Reichman University, joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how do you see Israel's justification for targeting journalists as terrorists impacting global perception of this conflict?
I think it's important to understand, first of all, that Hamas controls all of the flow of information from the Gaza Strip. What this means is that it is impossible to function as a journalist inside the Gaza Strip without having some kind of affiliation with Hamas, or at least without having their consent, because otherwise they will not let you work as a journalist, and they will not let you disseminate the information that you collect in the Strip. So there's really no way of operating in the Gaza Strip as a journalist without the consent of Hamas. Now the question is whether this specific journalist only received the consent of Hamas, or whether this is someone who is an active member of the terrorist organization. We know since October 7th that journalists and terrorists are sometimes one and the same, unfortunately. We've seen that during the attacks, there were AP journalists and Reuters journalists who were not just covering the attacks, but were actually part of the attacks. They were participating in the attacks. So the distinction between journalist and terrorist becomes quite blurry in this situation. I don't know what is true, what is the case with a specific journalist, but it is important to note that the distinction is not always that clear.
And now, since Professor, you have mentioned that it's very blurry and we cannot, it's not easy to make a distinction between these journalists and terrorists. So what steps can Israel take to balance this military actions to protect the journalists in conflict zones?
Well, I think that, first of all, Israel is definitely incurring a great deal of PR damage as a result of hurting or killing journalists, regardless of whether we know that they're actually Hamas activists, because as far as world perception is concerned, these are journalists. Most people do not understand this blurry distinction that I mentioned before, and simply think that there are journalists and there are terrorists, and these are different people. Of course, Israel has to do everything that it can to avoid harming any innocent civilians, and that includes journalists. But because some of these journalists also moonlight as terrorists, then it may be inevitable in some cases to target these people and suffer from some publicity problems abroad.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Now, Palestinian terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's assassination of Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza, including correspondent Anas Al Sharif. In a statement, Hamas said the attack was part of a widespread targeting of journalists unprecedented in any war, aimed at silencing media coverage in Gaza. Hamas called upon the UN Security Council and the international community to condemn the killings and hold Israeli leaders accountable, describing Al Sharif as a symbol of free journalism. Meanwhile, the Foreign Press Association has also condemned the killing of Palestinian journalists in Gaza City, saying it is outraged by what it described as the Israeli military's targeted killing of journalists who were reporting on events as they occurred. The FPA also called on Israel to cease attacks on journalists and allow reporting to continue freely. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Gilad Hirschberger. He's a political psychologist at Reichman University. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us. Now, Hamas also condemned this Israel's targeting of Al Jazeera journalists. How significant is this condemnation, and what impact could it have on international calls for accountability if it holds any power?
The Hamas condemnation is not only ironic, it's almost amusing in the sense that they are upholding the value of free journalism. It's important to remember that Hamas is as far as anyone can imagine from the values of freedom, from the values of free journalism. Hamas came to power in the Gaza Strip. First, it was elected in 2006, and then in 2007, it threw from the rooftops all of the members of the Palestinian Authority that did not align themselves with the agenda of Hamas. So Hamas is not exactly a bastion of free speech and of all the values that it very ironically upholds at the moment. Hamas is in a campaign, in a public relations campaign, and part of the campaign is to try to say that Israel is the one that is preventing free speech by targeting journalists. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that it's okay to target journalists. It's not. But some of these journalists, as we know, are active terrorists. And this is, this blurry distinction creates situations in which supposed journalists are targeted, but they are in fact terrorists.
Yes, indeed. It's important to remember that Hamas stating this is a terrorist organization. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us, Professor Gerald, Professor, and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he spoke with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This comes as Germany confirms EU and NATO officials, along with Zelensky, will join a European call on Ukraine. Berlin says it is organizing a virtual meeting of European leaders on Wednesday ahead of that call with US President Donald Trump. After speaking with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Zelensky says they agreed to meet in person in September. He says they discussed sanctions on Russian oil. The leaders also reviewed progress in the India-Ukraine bilateral partnership and discussed ways to further enhance cooperation in areas of mutual interest. These talks come as diplomatic efforts intensify ahead of the Trump-Putin meeting. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joins us live from London. Thank you, Keith, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, with Ukrainian President Zelensky engaging with other leaders, including Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, so how does this EU view these diplomatic efforts in the context of Ukraine's broader strategy?
Good afternoon, Asma from London. I think this is what we would have expected from President Zelensky prior to the meeting in Alaska. It is very important from his point of view, and frankly from the world's point of view, that he should be at those talks in Alaska. After all, they are going to be talking about Ukraine, and therefore having the Ukrainian president there is pretty important. I think what he's doing is calling in favors. He's showing the White House how very strong he is, and he has been, for his country, an incredible leader in building up relationships between other people all over the world. He must be the most traveled head of state, I think, of any country in the world. And he's calling in his favors, reminding everyone that he needs to be there in Alaska. We leave India to one side and come back to that in a second. But in terms of all the other calls he's made, these are what one would have expected. The Saudi call, of course, the call to the leaders of Britain, France, and Germany. These are all essential allies in ensuring that Donald Trump sticks to the script, which is that there should be no secession of territory to President Putin and the Russians. So it's all understandable. As far as India is concerned, India now seems to become center stage. And I would imagine he's following in from what Trump has done to India, the accusation that in some way India buying Russian oil ensures that this conflict does continue. This is complete nonsense, because India has bought Russian oil for decades. It's had a strong relationship with Russia, and nobody has suggested what the alternative should be to India buying oil of this kind. This is a sovereign decision of India's. So I think the fact that he's now bringing Narendra Modi into this is somehow to try and encourage Narendra Modi to stop buying this oil, which he will not do. Why should he? He's got a contract with the Russians. Their deal has been made. Nobody would suggest for 1 minute that Britain should renege on any agreements it's made with anybody if there is some kind of dispute in the world. So it's unfair to put India under this kind of spotlight. But Narendra Modi is a very strong and powerful leader. I'm sure he can deal with it. Good to know that he's meeting with Mr. Modi in September. India is not central to peace in Ukraine and Russia. It's not a party to the proceedings. I suppose in the same way as some of the other countries are, the European countries. So it's nice that they talked, but I'm sure that Mr. Modi would have made it very clear they've got a contract, they have to stick to their contract. And of course, India wants peace. India is one of the most peaceful nations that has ever been created. It's got 5,000 years of civilization. It doesn't want a war anywhere. So I think he's pushing it an open door if he's asking India to lobby for peace. And of course, India was one of the first countries that welcomed the decision by President Trump to meet with President Putin in Alaska.
And since you've already mentioned that, why is India being pulled into this? What about Saudi Arabia? Why is Saudi Arabia being pulled into this?
Because Saudi Arabia has a lot of clout, because it's got oil. And maybe President Zelensky is asking Mohammed bin Salman to give India the oil that the Russians are currently giving him. Who knows? It's no business, to be honest, of the president of Ukraine where oil is bought from. But who knows why Saudi Arabia has been brought in? The fact that both Saudi and India are being telephoned in this way is perhaps indicative of the fact that this is causing the Americans a lot of problem. Look, from the Americans' point of view, why criticize India for carrying out what it's done for decades, and at the same time decide to meet President Putin in Alaska? It just doesn't make sense. As Jay Shankar, the foreign minister, has said very clearly, foreign secretary has said very clearly, the European countries themselves are in bilateral contracts with the Russians. So why is everyone being picked on in this way? I think that the best thing for them to do is to listen and respect the words of President Zelensky to this extent. He wants to be at that table. He wants to be able to ring up the White House and said, I've rung up all these people, they all support me, I need to be there. I agree with him. You simply cannot have peace talks on Ukraine without the Ukrainians being present. Yes. You can't start giving up their land without them agreeing.
Yes, indeed. Always nice hearing from you, Keith Vaz. Thank you for always joining us and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. President Donald Trump has said that Washington, D.C. will be liberated from crime and homelessness in Truth Social post. He vowed a sweeping crackdown citing recent assaults and viral crime videos. The Democratic mayor, Muriel Bowser, says violent crime is at a 30-year low, down 26% this year. Trump praised Bowser personally, but said she failed to fix the problem. He's considering deploying hundreds of National Guard troops, with their roles still under discussion. Federal officers from more than a dozen agencies are already in the city. President Trump also wants swift evictions of homeless residents and has hinted at a federal takeover. President Donald Trump says Washington, D.C. will be liberated from crime and homelessness in his Truth Social post. He vowed a sweeping crackdown citing recent assaults and viral crime videos. For this discussion, we are joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now,
good to see you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, President Trump has promised to liberate Washington, D.C. from crime as well as homelessness, while Mayor Bowser says something else. So how do you assess the tension between these two perspectives, and what does this say about, again, a political divide in U.S.?
I think we have to remember that President Trump, one of his dear friends, is the ex-mayor of New York, Mayor Giuliani. And we remembered that a number of years ago when crime in New York was off the charts and Giuliani came in. Every time there was a smashed window, he would make sure it was repaired, e.g. dealing with all the little things that eventually brought the crime rate and the murder rate in New York down considerably. And I believe that President Trump will have that in his mind as well. He has been asking ICE, the border department, to deal with all the illegal immigration, and at times in various parts of America, that has then brought a rise in crime as well. That is what is going through Trump's mind in regard to this, of how people view law enforcement. And he is someone that very
Mark.
much passionate.
Sorry, Mark. U.S. President Donald Trump has started speaking in a press conference. That was Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst.
Look at the border.
Thank you for joining.
Biden said there's nothing you can do. Kamala was the border czar. She never called one of the Border Patrol agents who are great. ICE is great. Never spoke to anybody. Never went there. But she was the border czar. And everybody said it was impossible to fix. I fixed it in 3 months. No, really. I fixed it the first week, but really fixed it over the last couple of months. And I mean, literally to a point where, as I said, 0 illegals entering our country in the last 90 days. Pretty amazing. It's time for dramatic action. We're going to do the same thing over here. It's going to be a very safe city very soon. We're not looking to take years, because a lot of people die in years. And we've got incredible people in this country, except we have to allow them to do their job. And that we will deliver like nobody's ever delivered before. I actually think it's easy. You know, if you're competent, it's easy. If you're incompetent, it's impossible. But I'm very competent. Last week, my administration surged 500 federal agents into the district, including from the FBI, ATF, DEA, Park Police, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Secret Service, and the Department of Homeland Security. You know, a lot of nations, they don't have anything like that. They got some police, and they're rough police. They don't have DEA, ATF, FBI, Park Police, the U.S. Marshal Service, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security. They got some police, but they're rough police, and they do their job. They don't have crime. We're not going to have crime either. They made dozens of arrests, and that's what starts to happen. Again, cashless bail. Watch what we do with that. Today, we're formally declaring a public safety emergency. This is an emergency. This is a tragic emergency. And it's embarrassing for me to be up here. You know, I'm going to see Putin. I'm going to Russia on Friday. I don't like being up here talking about how unsafe and how dirty and disgusting this once beautiful capital was, with graffiti all over the walls. It's another part of it, by the way, because we're talking about safety, but we're also talking about beautification. We have the most beautiful, potentially, capital in the world. We always had. But people come from Iowa, they come from Indiana, they come and then they get mugged. Not going to happen. Keep coming, because by the time you get your trip set, it's going to be safe again, and it's going to be clean very quickly. We're going to replace the medians that are falling down all over the roads. We're going to replace the potholes. We're going to put a nice new coat of asphalt over the top. No, we don't have to rip the road out and spend 7 years building a new road because they cut everything. Because some designers said, well, we need 1/4 of an inch more turn for safety reasons. No, we're going to do it right. We're going to get it done quickly. So today we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia. And Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department as of this moment. And I'll be making the appropriate notifications to Congress and to the mayor, our new DEA administrator, who's one of the top in the country. He better be Terry. If you're not, I'm going to get rid of you so fast. Terry Cole. Terry, thanks. Very good. We just got him. Most highly recommended person. And you'll be designated as the interim federal commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department, okay? And you run them tough. They're good. You have a lot of good people. You have people that shouldn't be there. You also have people that shouldn't be there. They got in there because of woke. But you have a lot of great police, and those people are the ones that want to help you. This city will no longer be a sanctuary for illegal alien criminals. We will have full, seamless, integrated cooperation at all levels of law enforcement, and we'll deploy officers across the district with an overwhelming presence. You'll have more police, and you'll be so happy because you'll be safe. When you walk down the street, you're going to see police, or you're going to see FBI agents. We're going to have a lot of agents on the street. And you're going to have a lot of essentially military, and we will bring in the military if it's needed, by the way. We're going to have National Guard. But Pete Hegseth will tell you about it. We will bring in the military if needed. People say, oh, that's so terrible. He's going to bring in, it's been used many times over the years. I don't think we'll need it. I think we've got so many great people, including the people that are in the police department with proper leadership. They'll immediately begin massive enforcement operations targeting known gangs, drug dealers, and criminal networks to get them the hell off the street, maybe get them out of the country, because a lot of them came into our country illegally. They shouldn't have been allowed in. They come from Venezuela. They come from all over the world. We're going to get them the hell out. They won't be here long. But some of these people, a lot of them, are homegrown criminals. And these are bad people. These are rough people. And this is just a list of some of the people that were given to me today that were criminals removed from the D.C. streets this weekend. They were rough and tough. But we're rougher and tougher. Look at these people here. Nothing, you know. They're not going to be your local school teacher. Look at this guy. He has killed people numerous times. They're not going to be an asset. They will never be an asset to society. I don't care. I know we all want to say, oh, they're going to be rehabbed. It's not going to be rehabbed. I'm going to ask Doug Burgum to come up and say a couple of words because he's in charge, as you know. He's Interior, but he's in charge of the U.S. Park Police. And I've heard so many great things about the Park Police. They're proud of it. They've been there for a long time. Their families oftentimes grow into the roles. They love the country. They love this area. So, Doug, could you say a few words, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the U.S. Park Police, this is the oldest federal police force in the nation. They were formed in 1791 by none other than President George Washington. They've got the awesome responsibility of protecting our nation's most sacred monuments. The National Mall, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln.
Now we're joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us, and sorry for the earlier interruption of the live. So now that President Trump has also indicated that he even might deploy military in this situation, and stating that homeless people are kind of, in his words, useless. They will not be useful for the society. What's your reaction to these comments?
Trump has always been consistent. He has always said this. He said it coming up and leading to his second administration. He turned around and said that he will deal with the problems on the border, Texas and Mexico, on the southern border. We have to remember in context that the numbers that have come over that border illegally over the last 4 years under the previous administration of Joe Biden and an auto pen, the issue is this, is that was there 11 million people coming over that border? Was there far more? This is illegal. He feels that this has a huge effect on the United States of America and on the civil aspects and the whole thing of keeping society together. He has always been, as I was just saying before he spoke, always strong on law and order. and values the fabric of civil society very much. And remember, in his previous administration, we saw BLM riots, etc., Antifa on the streets, and the damage that were done, and there were many fires, many riots that were going on, which is something that President Trump, disagreed with profoundly, because he wants order and he wants people to be able to go about their business, etc., and live the American dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and does not want anarchy. So, in regard to the homelessness, it's of course it's difficult. We look at what's been happening in California, etc. So he is going in there to tidy it up, and of course, to some people, this looks awful. This looks absolutely awful, etc., etc. But he passionately believes, as I say, in law and order, but also is then looking up and saying, well, this is Washington, D.C., this is our capital. I want to clean it up. I want it to look good around the world. I want tourists to be able to come here and feel safe, and whether they're American or whether they are then foreign, for people to then enjoy. Asuma.
And Mark, thank you for sharing that. I would like to also go back to our earlier discussions, questions, since we cut to the live. What's your take on the division between this, the two perspectives and the tension in U.S.?
Well, that tension was there on January the 6th, 2021. So that it doesn't surprise me that certain things are then repeated. If Mayor says, well, we've got under that whole thing under control. Remember, on that day and leading up to that, it actually asked for the National Guard to be deployed, and Pelosi then say no. There is a huge, if you're talking about the whole of the United States politically, of course, there is a huge divide, and there is a real concern where many of these illegal immigrants that have come over, are they agitators within the country? And I would say, with some of the people that I talk to over there and know personally, that is also a concern. Yes, because they do not have positive things for the United States of America. They have ill, and the other thing is, it's an ideological battle between those people, to say it, who believe in a socialist communist mindset, and those people that believe in capitalism, and coming back to that phrase earlier of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and what people profoundly believe is the American dream, and what it actually stands for, instead of, and he is profoundly, like many other people, are against people having the riots that they saw a number of years ago, and also where he promised his base, we are going to arrest people, and if they do not have a right to be here, we are going to then deport them. And that is what is playing out, and this is what he promised his voter base. Asuma.
Thank you very much, Mark Sutherland, for always joining us and sharing your insight, all the way from London. Now we move on to our next news. Colombian hopeful presidential candidate and Senator Miguel Uribe has died, his family has announced today. The 39-year-old had been hospitalized since June after being shot in the head during a campaign event. Uribe, a potential presidential candidate from the right-wing opposition, was shot in Bogota on June 7th during a rally and underwent multiple surgeries before succumbing to his injuries. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has demanded justice after Colombian presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe has died after being shot 2 months ago. In a statement on X, Rubio said that the United States stands in solidarity with Uribe's family. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Japan. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, the tragic death of Colombian Senator Miguel Uribe, it has sparked outrage both domestically and internationally. How do you think this assassination will affect Colombia's political landscape?
Currently, under the President Petro, the Colombian government tried to arrange a negotiation for peace with multiple armed groups. So that's why indeed, despite his efforts, negotiation with multiple groups means that it is not easy to conclude. So that's why the law and order situation is deteriorating last some years under the President Petro. And in case of the president system in the Colombia, every 4 years they need to elect, and the same person cannot be the candidate. So that's why the last one was 2022, and so next one will be the 2026, so next year. So that's why people are talking about next candidate of the president election. But because of the deteriorating situation of the law and order, the potential candidate was assassinated by gun. That is a big problem in Colombia. And so last time, the 2022 president election was very close race. So it is expected that next one could be the close one. So that's why who will be the candidate is a very big matter. But one of the potential candidates was assassinated. It's also the big matter of the law and order. So that's why this is not very bad news for Colombia, I think.
So, Doctor, what are the broader implications of such violence in the stability of Colombia's democracy?
View from the Colombia democracy, of course, view from the economy, the Colombia was relatively good, but at the same time, in the Latin America, most of the country face many problems, but Colombia faced, despite Colombia faced many big problems, despite this relatively better the economies. But at the same time, view from democracy, of course, this is respected. So the current Petro administration was the first left side administration. And so this has succeeded to prove that election is meaningful in the Colombia. And that's why the view from democracy, the Colombia's way is relatively good. But at the same time, if the Colombia faces such a situation, for a long time, Colombia has some big problem related to the drug, and it will export to the smuggle to the United States. So that's why if Colombia's politics governing is face a crisis, of course this is related to its security of the other country, especially the United States, and the situation is unstable in this region, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for always joining us and sharing your insight all the way from Japan. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.